Welcome back to the Outthinkers podcast. I'm your host, Kahin Krippendorf. This special episode of Outthinkers was recorded in front of a live audience in New York City and made possible by our friends at LHH, a global leader in HR advisory and talent solutions, trusted by executives around the world to navigate change and lead with confidence. They have deep expertise in executive search, leadership development, workforce transformation, and career transition. LHH empowers organizations and their leaders to thrive in an ever-evolving business landscape. Our guest is none other than Oscar Munoz, former CEO and chairman of United Airlines, who guided the airline through one of the most significant turnarounds in corporate history. He's also the author of the acclaimed memoir, Turnaround Time, which offers a behind-the-scenes look at the human side of executive leadership. In this candid conversation, Oscar shares deeply personal lessons on leading through crisis, building trust from the ground up, and the enduring power of authenticity. Whether you're leading your organization through change or navigating a career transition, this conversation offers wisdom and inspiration for every step of the journey. Let's dive in.
Darn, we missed the best part.
You gonna tell us?
Stock growth, yes. Yeah. I mean, it's funny in today's world. I mean, there's so many different levels and KPIs for success, personal, professional, certainly financial. And I talk a lot about the human quotient and qualities, but I always say without the delivery of a $48 stock price to 100, without the delivery of the growth that we expect, and with the continued existence of this company and the growth that it's had, that's the true level of success it's learning. So, it's like you get accused sometimes of being kind of, oh, you're like this human person as opposed to this strategist in this business. It's a combination of both. They're both critical. But in an industry like this, as we're going to talk about, I mean, you've got a lot of folks. I mean, 140,000 people spread all over the world that don't ever see management other than the dictums and the messages and the you shall do this sort of thing. And we had 8 CEOs in the previous 10 years before I got there. So you can imagine what these, quote, frontline folks were thinking when they yet received another new person who was about to stand in front of a podium and say, we're going to, the strategy. And so I knew we had to do something different.
Yeah, I think maybe you could bring us first in those first few days. Just give us a little bit of context on you entered in a very disruptive period, both the business, leadership, and also very soon your personal health. Could you just give us a little context? And then what did you learn about that experience, not just on the operational side, but on the emotional side of righting the ship?
So it's a broad story, and as you heard, there's a book that kind of explains all of that. I never thought I'd write a book. Sort of to put it in perspective, the company was troubled in many ways across all those constituents, your customers, which are important, all of you. For all of you that live in our hub cities, you can go back to that time frame and you're like, yep, they sucked. That's a technical term. And so, probably the first lesson, and Todd Benson's in the room and reminded me of a key thing about when you speak, is like leave people with pithy comments that they take away. And so I'll leave you with several, because when you write a book, you have to come up with axioms. So I've done that. But the concept of a turnaround, which this was, is, in my experience, there are, by the nature of the company's success or lack of success, you have to figure out where to start first, right? There's many things broken. And in that process, there are many people in the room in your community that when you first take a role that are just ready to tell you, you need to fix this, or no, it's you have to do this. And it's shut things down, fire people, do all of this kind of stuff for me, change your coffee. There's just a myriad of things. And I think one of the critical success factors that I would leave with you is you got to figure out what that first platform that you're going to build this foundation of all of the strategy. And because without that, you might be building on a bed of quicksand, right? That's the phrase that you would do. So finding that quick thing, or that thing that's first, is one of the first lessons that I would have. And you heard a little bit of the remarks there. How do you do that? Well, you can listen to everyone. You can hire the consultants, all the the typical things people do. And certainly there was no shortage of that. But because of my background and where I'd been before, I had learned that especially in an organization that was so troubled and the culture had been so demolished, right? Because we were the friendliest guys for a long time. And so the expectation of that is high for all of you. You hear that phrase, you're like, well, you damn well better treat me like, right? And we had let our employees down by forcing them to try to be something that we were not being to them. And I wouldn't have figured that out with this concept of listen and learn before you lead. And again, that's an axiom that's come out of my work, but at the end, it was just an instinct from who I am and how I was raised that it was an earnings call. And I like to have it in my earnings calls. The Bloomberg, the Bloomberg screens that monitor second by second stock price. And it's just a really nice play for my team when you're sitting there talking about your business results. And when somebody says something, you can see the immediate blip, right? So it's feedback that I don't have to give, right? If somebody is like rambling on and the stock price, it's a nice way to keep a thread on that. And of course, it's my first time. A lot of question about my abilities, my lack of experience in the industry, all of the naysayer things that you'd expect out of the finance community. And so I'm geared up. My team is gathered me for the question that's going to come. Like, you don't know crap about this industry. What are you going to do? And they want to know the plan that's going to turn around this company that's been flailing for a few years. And so, of course, the team wrote this wonderful, pristine, great, articulate statement about the plan of attack. When asked the question, I said, and this is a true story, I said, I don't know yet. The yet was an afterthought after I watched the Bloomberg screen just plummet. Because it's like, see, he's admitting it. And trust travels at the speed of vulnerability or transparency. And I knew that above all things, in my involvement with the team on the ground in my short time there, I was a board member, so I'd had some experience and time with them. But I knew that, reading the script, that had all the right words and the right things to say about, productivity and all these things, was going to fall deaf, maybe not on the financial community, but certainly on the 140,000 people we employ worldwide that had been through 8 years of hell or 10 years of hell. So my instinctive answer was the truth. I don't know yet. And then the follow-up answer was, but I'm going to find out. Well, how are you going to do that? And this is the second time the stock dropped in that 5 minutes of speech. I said, I'm going to go out and ask the people that actually run this business from day to day. The people that take your ticket, the people that handle your luggage or throw your bags. It's an industry term, but we indeed do throw your bags. So all of you that love to buy really expensive luggage and check it, I would not. We mean all due deference, but stuff gets thrown around. But what better group? And my instinct was to go find out from them what they felt. And it's like, well, how are you going to do that? So again, the stock dropped. And how long are you going to take? I was going to say 90 days, but again, the immediate feedback was showing me that I needed to do something a little shorter. So it's 60 days. And I'm going to go and listen. And then I'm going to come back to you with a plan of attack.
I feel, if I'm remembering correctly, there also was this foundation of admitting that you had failed, right? That the company had failed. And you needed this foundation of authenticity, as you said. Can you tell us a little bit about that first communication?
Communication is just so critical, right? And in a world where everyone flies and everyone has an opinion, which all you do, every single flight, right? If it goes perfect, you literally say nothing. But the slightest little bit thing, you tell everyone, oh yeah, I was sucked. It's like, I had a Delta flight coming in last night. First thing I did when I sat down to dinner with the team late, I said, I made the mistake of flying Delta. So I'm just as guilty. But communication is key. And the first thing we did, and it was again met with a lot of chagrin and a lot of concern, we took out a full-page ad in the Wall Street Journal that was just a note of apology to all our customers. It's like, listen, we've not done well. We've not lived up to the name. We've not lived up to your trust. That whole thing. But it was me, and it was my words saying that, and it was like, what is this? And then, but importantly, when you do that, you have to have a vehicle or a mechanism where people can respond. Today in social media, there's a ton of comments underneath where people tell you all these wonderful negative things. But at the same time, we came up with a tool that said, send me your thoughts, send me your things directly, which everybody says, Oscar, do you really want to do that? It's like, yeah, why not? and I've gotten so much input and feedback from that. But again, back to this trust aspect of having to rebuild it. This was vulnerability. I know we didn't do well. Show me, told me, and then made it a course over the course of my time to always sit and talk with customers and employees everywhere I went. And it became something that was a norm and expected, which is indeed a huge thing you're signing up for. Because when you're flying through a terminal at 10 o'clock at night and you've been gone all week long and you're exhausted and you've talked to 1,000 people over the course of the week, there's that one human that sees you across the room or across the terminal, and that note of recognition, employee or customer, and you're like, I just want to get in my car and go home and go to sleep. But you see that recognition, being aware of that human and their reaction and stopping and walking over. That old phrase, right? That's the only interaction they're probably going to have with you. The meaning of that to them is key. The meaning of that to your mission, meaning, hey, this person is different. He does indeed listen. Or I met him at 10 o'clock at night and we stopped and talked. And the fact of the matter, it's a 2, 3, 4, 5-minute conversation at the max. You can lose a little more sleep with that, but the amplification of that was a really critical thing. And that's something for all of us to learn. Those small moments really matter to the other person. And they don't care what you've been doing beforehand. It's kind of like your children, right? It's like, it's easy to come in and say, hey, Dad's really busy. Or you stop and you just say, hey, kids are like, blah, 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 then they go off, right? You yell to your spouse and say, hey, honey, I'm home, and I'm gonna take a couple calls, and everybody's cool. But if you walk in with this terse, leave dad alone or leave mom alone, it creates a culture over time that it's like they just learn to avoid you. Yeah. And those are the human qualities that I think I sense that I've learned over the course of my upbringing from many wonderful people around me.
Yeah, and you've mentioned social media, you've mentioned viral. I think that, we can't go without probably people here are thinking of this moment that's like a global PR
what moment
crisis.
Would that be?
When some airport authorities forcefully removed a United Airlines customer out of the plane. What did you do to stay grounded, and how did you handle that as a leader?
All right, so you're going to get this a very good example, I think, of this transparency and vulnerability thing, because this is a moment that hopefully none of you ever face, or you'll face some small portion of it, where there is a path in the road and there is no one else to make the decision. There is no other information to gain. It is just raw human decision point about how you act, how you answer, how you lead. And so the situation, as you described it, was, again, the facts of the matter were important but irrelevant. All people saw in this day and age, by the way, we were the first viral video. We've checked time and time again. We were the first people to go global with one of those negative. I'm sure everyone in this room. I always ask, has anybody not seen it? And there's always someone in the back that says, what are you talking about? Everybody looks at that person. And so the situation was simply that there was a lot of operational things that were going on that forced all sorts of things that led to a page 875 of some manual at some point in time, that when you're overfilled and you need to put pilots for the next flight and nobody wants to get off, there's a mechanism to say, Lord Young, we'd like you to get off the plane. And of course, you're going to say, look, why me? Why not somebody else? And then when somebody refuses, the policy book that no one knew existed says, well, you call law enforcement and you ask law enforcement to remove that person. And the person that we asked to move wasn't buying that either and began to, for lack of a better term, fight back with law enforcement. Law enforcement, not being part of United, what are they taught to do, right? And they're taught to arrest, and they meet force with force. So what resulted is what you saw, this horrific experience of this. So that's what happened. The details behind it, there was not a United employee involved in any of this, so those were our facts. The individual affected was not a pristine human, as none of us are, but he had some special things that were going on. So as the spin masters work through this, it's like, whoa, before we commit to too much acceptance of this issue as being a United issue, let's look at all these facts, was the backdrop, which was a unmitigated disaster. Because as we've learned since then with these global, sort of virus, people they want facts. They just see the visual. They see a United brand. They see your face. They see your initial response, which was horrid as well. as well for all sorts of reasons, right? You have regulatory lawyers, corp com people that say, no, don't admit, don't do this, say this versus this. And so all of that happens. And this was on formerly Twitter, now X, before it was a thing. It's like nobody knew that what virality meant. 800 million views later across the world, I became globally infamous for not only the response, but what happened to United. So that's the situation. What do you do after that? So the title of this chapter is, it is never, and I mean never, too late to do the right thing. And the decision was, we need to get, we've gotten behind, we need to do something about this. So the decision was to get in front of a very popular global TV or a national TV show, morning show, Good Morning America. So expected, I think, 20 to 30 million views. Because again, just like ancient Rome, right? The Colosseum was a place of spectacle, and nobody loves anything more than watching a CEO squirm under the lights under the wise tutelage of somebody asking all the questions with the people in their ear saying, just get him, and watch someone squirm, and began the infamous BP situation, right? That was played for me 1,000 times. Don't do that. And so I was coached and guided for half a day on how to effectively spin the facts. This wasn't United. It was the Chicago Police Department. It wasn't our employees. It was our Express, not a United Care, all those things. And this was not a good human being that fought back. And how to say that effectively, efficiently, concisely, so the world just says, oh, you know what? You're right. Never mind. What I haven't told you about my background in my early ages, I was born out of this country in Mexico to a single mom, and I was raised by my grandmother. We call her Mama Josefina, and I lived with her for the first 8 years of my life. She's a woman who, this is where it always gets a little emotional because, you know, we all have dormant and latent values that are put into us that we don't recognize until the proverbial shit hits the fan. And this is a woman who, she didn't have a home. She lost her dad, her husband early. But if your familia in Spanish has a much more depth and resonance. So we were never without a home, but we didn't have our own home. And we traveled around the northern part of Mexico. And I just remember holding her grizzled hand and walking down these dusty sort of roads, literally, and never feeling that we were different or that we didn't have anything. And her strength and her conviction and her ability to turn the other cheek and never blame anyone and all these incredible human qualities that we want to be, she lived them all. I didn't recognize that at the time, but it was embedded hard in me. So that night, before the Good Morning America show, I got up in the middle of the night, nervous, of course, the entire brand, my heritage, my experience. There was a lot of commotion about me not knowing anything about this industry. We had just begun to turn everything around. We were like, people were getting excited about the United sort of turnaround. And then this happens. So as I came back to try to crawl back into bed, I did fall on my knees. And I'm not a pious person. I won't pretend to be that. But as Lincoln said, I fell on my knees and looked up because there was no one else and nowhere else to look. And in that moment, I thought of my grandmother and kind of what would she do? And I didn't formulate anything in my mind other than the values that she created about not blaming anyone else. So fast forward to the next morning, my corp com and legal team is behind me. You know, the Good Morning America crew is there. She's got everything and, very cordial, sort of abrupt sort of handshake between us. She knows, I mean, she's out for blood, right? And she starts with this big question. And what came out of me, and this is an important thing for all of you that'll go through this, what came out of me, I remember the exact verbiage and the exact words because there were nobody else's words but mine. And I had a sense then that I would be here somewhere years afterward answering the same question about this issue. And I said, and they asked, well, how can this happen? I said, it was horrific, was the term. And I said, and I let the policies and procedures of running an airline get in the way of doing what's right for another human being. Just came out of me. And what's funny about it, my team behind me, like the gasp was audible, like, he's not supposed to say that. Her ear, you could hear her ear, her producer's like, wait, what did he say? Because what do you say when someone just says, you're right, I was wrong. And I quickly followed it up, and here are the 10 things we are gonna do in the next 30 days to make sure this never happens again on our airline. And it was traumatic and dramatic and all that, but the news cycle went quickly. We got past it. We did those things in 30 days. And so again, the lesson, it's never too late to do the right thing. And it's still something to talk about. All of you that went to business school and all the top business schools at first, this was a case study on how to very badly handle a PR issue to how to recover from a really bad response to a PR issue. And so I share that story with all of you because in some way, shape, or form, you'll face that. And, this concept of truth, despite its shortness in our climate today, that's not a political statement. That's just a worried statement that all great civilizations first implode from within. And it starts with this beginning of telling untruths, right? And beginning to distrust each other and create polarization. And in that world, I come in with this book and my views that, it's like truth is such an important thing and people will follow that. And you as leaders have a great role in keeping that going forward.
Well, I want to get a little bit more into those values. And I'm just going to ask questions for about 10 more minutes and then you guys are going to ask questions. So start thinking about what you'd like to ask.
How do I get global services?
What was that? What does it say? What LHH sees is that, especially later stage career, people in later stage in their career, they care a lot about autonomy, respect, making a difference. I've heard respect in there, respecting your people. But how about for you? When you think of your legacy, is legacy a driver for you? And when did it start becoming a driver for you, if it is? What drives you?
I'm a really simple person, and back to these latent and dormant values, and I think of my grandmother. What was her agenda? What was her desire for legacy? It wasn't anything. It was, I want to do the right things. I want to be a hard worker. I want to be able to provide comfort and guide to my grandchild. And those are human qualities that sort of traverse all of those phrases of legacy. So I didn't really think about any of those things. I thought about the people that worked for me and what they'd gone through. I listened to a lot of them and all of that. Again, this listen and learn before you lead. It was just a really perfect sort of process for us because this group of 100,000+ people, not every single one, but they begin to feel the turnaround of United. The book I wrote, if you read the foreword, it's, my words, the most hard thing of writing a book was the acknowledgments and my opening statement because I devoted to this United family and what they'd gone through. Because I met people who I would try to gain their trust, and I didn't have an entourage of folks. I would just stop someone in the hallway and I'd see a lanyard. A famous story is I was walking in the back Byzantine world of an airport, and this guy was wearing a Dallas Cowboy, American football, Lord, lanyard. And as I'm walking by, I just couldn't help myself. I was like, Cowboys, God, I hate the Cowboys. So this guy just stops. It's like, who is this guy? And, for the subsequent 5 minutes, he didn't quite know who I was, but we engaged in what can best described as a human interaction, right? Building this trust through a common sort of conversation. Then all of a sudden, I've earned the right to ask, well, my name's Oscar, I just got here. How long have you been here? And what do you see as wrong? And that became sort of the everywhere I went, people became more and more trusting to really, really, really tell me the things that were wrong. And the art of that is, well, how could you possibly get that much input and feedback and then craft it into an actual strategy for the corporation? It's like you don't. But you get a lot of sentiment. And more importantly, through that listening, you get a lot of human engagement and involvement. Because I'd always say, thanks for your input. I said, this is what I'm doing. I'm gathering all this information. I don't know where it's going. But somewhere out of this conversation, you're going to see a common thread that I hope when you hear it, you feel you had a part of it. And by the way, when this all terminated, the first thrust was, again, back to an earnings call, same Bloomberg station, ticking, ticking, ticking. I had a little health issue that I had to go away for a few weeks. And so everybody's waiting for the answer. And I say, the first thing we're going to do is regain the trust of our employees. Bloomberg, right? It's like, what the hell does that mean? Because that was the critical thing. And when 140,000+ people hear that, right, they can't help but feel being part of the solution, where then everything before was, you need to be this, and you need to be more productive, and you need to be the brand, and you need to, as they were always told what to do. All of a sudden, there was this, the onus isn't on me, it's on management. And I have so many great stories about, well, how are you going to do that? Mm-hmm. Like, I sent my team out. It's like, I don't care where you go and what you do, but ask them what they need to do. Famous story of our CFO in a small location goes into a small facility and asks this small group of 20 people that work in Delaware, one of the airports, and ask them. And then one guy finally raises his hand and says, we've been asking for a little refrigerator to be able to put our stuff when we come into the room for the last 10 years. And Jerry Latterman, our CFO, left the airport, went to a Target or a Costco, spent $100 on a small thing, and brought it back. Mm-hmm. Ladies and gentlemen, I have hundreds of stories of my team going out and doing that. And it's kind of like when somebody treats your child or a loved one in a way that's positive, you remember that stuff. And that's the kind of things that we did. That was the process that needed to be done in that company to regain that trust. It doesn't work everywhere. This is not a template for everyone. Hey, you should go out and do this. But this concept of listening and truly listening and learning from that before you lead, whatever your industry is, makes a lot of sense because you gain a lot of feedback. And to this day, the support I have from that management team and all the leaders, that when you walk with me in an airport, people come out of the woodwork. I mean, these people were, I would rather say I was unemployed than let them know I work at United, right? Phrases like that. I don't wear my badge anywhere. I always turn it upside down. It was that kind of sentiment that was out there. You don't get that from a survey. You don't get that from sending people out to do your mission. You get that from that personal interaction.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many questions, but I want to get to the audience questions. And I just want to open it up a little bit to a different topic because you're now a different type of leader, right? You're a thought leader, you sit on boards, you're an entrepreneur, you've kind of moved into this, what you might call the portfolio career. And we know that a lot of baby boomers are planning on retiring in the next 3 years, like 58%. And we know that very few of them plan on transitioning, but very few plan on retiring. So it does seem like somehow the traditional career trajectory is changing. So how did you think about, like when you decided what you were going to do next? How did you decide?
All of us give a lot of advice, and sometimes we rarely take it. This concept of listening to the people before you, when they try to give you something, like, when you're at 45 years old and your career is progressing, or you've just become CEO of a company, and somebody with a little grizzled, gray hair experience comes and puts their arm around you and tries to give you a little bit of advice. You're like, yeah, old timer, I get you. You know what? It's kind of like talking about retirement investment. Like, my pension, I don't want to think about that until all of a sudden the time's upon you. And so for me, again, trying to listen to my own advice, I began to listen to people, not because I was thinking of retiring anytime soon. It's like there's somebody, that old phrase that sharing is caring is a really important one to remember. Because people don't just come up to you to share things with you because they just want to impart their wisdom to you because they want to hear. Some do, clearly. But most people really, do care about you. And when you take that level, when you accept that someone is really taking the time to share with you and listen. And one of the things that I heard is never retire. You should retire into something. As opposed to just like, I want to go fishing and play golf, and I'm a big surfer, I'm going to surf the world. You cannot do that all the time. And Teddy Roosevelt has a famous, really long quote about a lot of us and what we do in life and the active life we lead, that at some point in time, sort of that carousel stops. And what people do with that, well, we are built a certain way. It's just stopping and not doing anything is anathema to us, right? We're going to go crazy. And you know who's going to kill us? Usually our spouse. And so his phrase concludes with, I would rather wear out than rust out. And I use that phrase a lot. So what I did, again, just as my own experience, knowing that background, as I knew I was at some point in time going to do something, okay, so what is it that I want to do? Right. So I built these concepts of pillars. Like, what's important to me? What am I good at? What haven't I done a lot of that I have? And then built those pillars, and this is what I want to do. I don't like, I despise inequality. in a deep way that you can't even imagine. Not politically, not ethnically, not anything. I just don't understand why we have such an amazing large group of haves and have-nots and how we don't reach back in a lot of ways. Personal sort of it. So how do I help that? So I had a big health issue. So health inequality is a big thing. So because of what I do, I go invest and do philanthropy for the American Heart Association, for startups in the heart diagnostic world. Inequality in financial things. I started a venture fund. I have a lot of friends in this city. I raised not a lot of money, but $100 million to invest in Latino and Latina founders who don't get any money from this community of money because they're not known. It's like, who are they and what do they do? And so we've got 28 portfolio companies. We've had 2 big major exits, and we're going to prove, another axiom, by the way, right? Proof, not promise. Like, I'm not asking for handout money. Give me money. We're going to deliver these great results. And you're going to see that this cohort of Americans is as capable as anyone else. And you all, too, can make a lot of money out of that. So, again, that's proof. And then with regards to education is the other thing. I mean, again, my journey in education was simply my high school counselor, Mrs. Duckworth, and I told this story at her eulogy, stopped me in the hallway when I was a junior in high school, and I was. If the surf is good in Huntington Beach, you go early, and then you sneak into school, and hopefully no one notices. Well, she caught me sneaking in, and so I thought I was in trouble. But we had just taken the preliminary SATs, and which I didn't know what they were necessarily. But she goes, "Oh, Oscar, it's like, I've been meaning to find you," and I'm like, "Oh boy, I'm in trouble." And then her question was simply one, and this is an important point for all of us, I think. She asked me, I saw your scores, and I'm wondering where you're thinking of going to college. And I sat there, stupefied, and said, "What's a college?" And therein lies the rub. With this whole DEI and the politicized nature, there is this vast amount of humanity here in our country, in our communities, that doesn't know the answer to that question, truly. That's what disadvantaged, that's what underrepresented means. So when people ask me, what do I do about diversity and inclusion? How do I help? Well, give a shit about a human that you see that has and shows merit and skills, and ask them that question. Where are you going to get a job? Where are you going to work, and how I can help? You don't have to wear banners and buttons and be political in any way, shape, or form. Helping another person. It's amazing sometimes the world we live in where we don't see that. We do live in vacuums. Well, I come from the other side of that vacuum, so it helped me to do that, and I can sort of talk about that. But that's just I did not know what a college was. And she helped me with the concept of filling out applications and writing checks and, this thing that I had zero idea. And I got accepted to a lot of incredible schools, of which I write in my book, one of this school in Boston, some of you may know about, that I turned down because I had no idea it's like my first time I've been on a plane. My dad and I are 2 country rubes walking around Harvard Yard. This black tie optional, I was a scholarship, 4-year scholarship at Harvard. I had no idea what that meant. My dad and I walking around, we go to this event, and I'm like this little map, and we go up to this thing, and there's some people at the front guarding the door, so to speak, and I walk up, and they're looking at you. My dad was wearing, he was a meat cutter, a union meat, so the blue jeans, the shirt, and he had that silver keychain with 100 different keys. Just never understood what all those keys were for. And I was a surfer kid, my hair down to my shoulders, shorts. I had Vans shoes on because I knew it was a formal sort of structure. And again, it's these things where you first figure out that you're different. So I walk up, and it's like they literally said, "You must be lost." And like, "I'm sure I am. Can you help me?" And somewhat, like, "Oh, like, what's your name again?" And it's like, "Well, you're at the right place." And they're kind of looking you up and down. And then you walk into this room where everybody is dressed, and God help me. I said, please let our table be somewhere in the back where we can just sit. Because I immediately, but no. I was way up in the front. And, these are the questions where people are asking you, what's your major, all these things. Foreign questions to me. And in that room, a woman sitting next to my dad and I, my dad, of course, like they try to put his napkin on his waist, and he just went, like, this is so stereotypical. But this kind woman next to me immediately understood the situation and began to divert questions and explain things in a way where made me feel included. Not for any other things other than being a really good human. And so my value system comes from experiences like that. And that's how I talk about them. When people want to politicize my views and all of this stuff. And so back to your concept of retirement, this inequality thing has grown in me. And so those are the things I do. So it's part of business. This venture fund has been successful. My startups are doing well. The philanthropy, the things that we do with the social impact fund, that we generate tons of money to do things in cities that help out the it's just the avenues I get to play in are so wonderful, so rewarding. And I started an MBA program in aviation that we're going to lead. And it's just these wonderful little things. And so that's exciting. So I always say, I am busy, I am healthy, and I'm happy. And I always answer the question like, oh, what are you doing? What am I? And it's amazing how those three phrases, everybody's just like, oh, that's so fun, that's so great. And I don't have to, because that's not about, well, I'm doing this and I'm making money at that. I'm very comfortable with that. Find your comfort. Find yourself, find the things that mean something to you, not when you're ready to retire, now. And it's amazing what that'll do for your career. Because once you know where you're headed and what you're good at, it's a concept, another concept, know thyself. And I say, truly, not the person you want to project to others, but the person that you truly are. It's the person people love, even though how much we try to hide it sometimes.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, my wife, who you know, you're on her board, also Latina, grew up in Louisiana, and she got this invitation to study at some school called Wharton Business School, and she was like, I don't know what that is. But they included her, and I hear that in your including employees, including customers. So now I think it's time for us to include the audience in this conversation. Who has a question?
That first question is always the hard, so thank you for your
thank
courage. By the way, thank you all for being here. You have no idea how much it means to a human who's been displaced to be treated in a way. So to you at LHH who do this for a living, I think the phrase somebody used last night, Melanie, it might have been you. It's one of the most vulnerable parts of a human being. And you take them from us, and us that are here who provide that service to folks. It's a really deeply meaningful, and people, not everyone goes through the process of being displaced, but it's a really meaningful. So thank you all for being here and using people like LHH for that. So truly, it's just why I'm here to talk to you, because has resonated with my things that I like. Yes, sir.
Thank you so much for sharing so many jewels of your journey.
Jewels.
I'm curious about your grandmother. Obviously was a powerful influencer and hero in your life. Whom else would you say are the heroes or the influencers that you really look up to today?
Well, my wife's not listening, but she always says like, dude, really? You never put me in that equation. It's like, there's a poem, Ulysses, where he talks about, I am parts of all that I've met, I think is the quote. And there's too many people to mention, and there's too many stories about people that had enough willingness to care about me to share. And I share a lot of those stories. My career went really well, really quickly, and it created a level of arrogance and confidence that was probably not warranted. And it took somebody to one day pull me aside and says, you're doing great. You've exceeded all our expectations. And he kind of folds the HR book, puts it aside, and says, now, if I could just talk to you as more of a friend. So I'm like, oh, he's probably wants me to date his daughter or something, right? I mean, that's the level of youth. I mean, I was 27 years old. I was a VP already. And, so things are going well. And he said a phrase to me, you've exceeded our expectations, but if I could share this as a friend, it's like, you're not yet as good as you think you are. And I remember thinking there like, wait, it didn't sound good, right? It didn't sound like date my daughter. And so I went through those 7 stages of, anger, grief. It's like, well, what the hell was that? But it was slow your roll, right? I was young, I was in an environment, I just switched companies. I went from Pepsi to Coke. Much like New York and Atlanta, 2 very different cultures. People at Coke were significantly more mature and older. To me, looked, at a 26-year-old leading an organization. I'm looking around the room. Pepsi was much younger. It's like, oh my God, who are these people? And so I felt I needed to, youth doesn't necessarily create innovation as much as age doesn't necessarily create wisdom, right? And I think I learned that quickly to just slow down and begin to listen, because that person that looked like my great aunt or my grandmother even, well, happens to be a Harvard MBA. Now, maybe 20 years ago, but the experience that she's gained, if you sit and listen to her, was incredibly invaluable. And so those are the things that I learned. And so many people along the way helped me in that regard. I have many stories about how people just course corrected you. But you have to make yourself open to that sometimes. Or someone has to bring the courage and the caring to share, which is why I always say, listen to people. It takes a lot for someone to come up to you and say, your suit doesn't really fit you, right? The emperor has no clothes. I do that today with some pretty high level people. And the initial response is like, not good. And these are all people you all know. But it's helpful because it builds a level of relationship where you can really make an impact. And because you do it out of caring, not out of, you need to, there's a genuine way of people connect and there's a disingenuine way.
Yeah.
What else?
Oscar, thank you. Really enjoyed it. Actually, I read your book.
Oh, thank you.
And it's really magnificent. It is a study in leadership and culture and engagement and results. So I actually helped change a culture, create a service culture within the company I was with for 11 years. And I actually used Southwest as one of the positive examples and United as one of the negative examples. I'm a United member, by the way. I fly United a lot.
That's fair.
But a couple of years ago, I flipped them. And obviously, it was because of a lot of your leadership. So thank you very much. I fly a lot, and things are tremendously better. So I appreciate that. Yeah. One of the things I wanted to ask you is, as a leader, you're handing the baton off to another leader. Could you give us a little bit of sense? Because what we do in our business is we help leaders, but leadership's about looking around the bend. So could you give us a little sense of where you think the airline industry is going and what it needs to do a little differently? I know you touched upon it a little bit at the end of your book, but love to know if you see a very, very different airline industry in the future.
There's not yet a way to digitally disrupt flying us as humans from one place to another. And there's no decreasing desire for all of us to fly to places, regardless of what happens, right? I mean, there's a spike, oh my God, Boeing, the 787s, and then, a week passes, and it's like, going to Europe and flying a 787. So we don't see any decrease in the demand. In fact, just an increase in demand. And so the move towards fuel efficient, if not fuel derived from different sources, is a big move. Supersonic is back. So the future of aviation is finally some innovation that's around the edges where it hasn't happened for the last 20, 30 years. We've gotten more fuel efficient. These 87s are really beautiful planes, the 350s, all of that. And so it's become more comfortable. But the future, it's this everlasting holy grail journey towards personalization is what I always talk about. I mean, do something for me, and the people that win that war are going to win. And one of United's great traits, we developed the app that we use today back in 2015, and it was one of the first things I did, because you could see then that people want less and less to engage with, not because they don't like humans or whatever, it's just too many moving parts. My life is too complicated. I want to cancel, I want to change, I want to adjust, I want to see my options, and I don't want to get in this queue on the phone and talk to this people because, and so we developed a mechanism where personalization, it's your tool to dig. And that began the journey of creating an environment. We went from 100,000 users to almost 60% of our bookings are made off that app now without using third-party things, which is more profitable for us, and all those things that happen. So that personalization, the improvement of Boom Supersonic is one of the companies I work with. We're gonna fly across the country in an hour and a half, fly to Asia in 7 hours. And so this world is going to become even smaller, despite the political views and differences we have. It's going to be even smaller to some degree. But throughout that, I always preach that it's always going to have to employ and deploy the human quotient, right? You're still going to have to deal with somebody on that plane that takes good care of you or not good care of you. That's someone that you're going to meet at the airport that handles your bags or whatever. And so keeping the trust of those employees is something that I think that I always preach. And and it's an important part of what things. And Southwest is another. You got to go with the flow. And I've worked with them quite a bit in their fight with Elliott, and I survived it to some degree. But they've got to catch up on a lot of things. This concept of technology, you can't be a Luddite. I mean, you have to accept and embrace those things early on, because now when you have to catch up, it's expensive, and you get behind you get behind so quickly. So continued innovation, hopefully continued friendliness, and certainly a lot more comfortable way to flight. But I do not see that going away until Beam Me Home Scotty from the Star Trek days develops, and that's nowhere near in our future that I know of. I'll try to answer more briefly if I can.
Thanks, Oscar. So I started flying Continental Airlines way back, and then they merged, and I lived through the turnaround that Gord Bethune took the company through, and watched it happen in real time because I was flying a lot. And I remember seeing the difference in the flight attendants and the pilots and just the energy and the spirit. And then obviously with the merger, things took a turn. Now that you've turned it around and transformed it again, what kind of skepticism did you meet? Because there must have been people that were there that said, yeah, we've been through this before. We've heard this before. The unions, I'm sure, stood up and said, well, wait a minute, you're asking for what? How did you navigate that type of trust building again?
So I'll start with the broader, sort of more specific. You have to have a conviction. As a leader, you have to have in your own mind a plan and proof and a conviction towards what you're doing. Your mind is one thing. Conviction and awareness and agreement from your leadership team is another. And then with that comes conviction. So from a business perspective, at one point in time, we decided that how we were going to grow the business was going to grow at these rates of growth that were unprecedented and would forewarn of if they're going to grow that much, prices are going to drop, and you are going to tank and bankrupt your business, and you're going to affect the other industry. We went forward with that, and again, back to the Bloomberg thing, I mean, we lost 12% of our stock that very day. I was on TV on CNBC, and I'm talking about the virtuals and the growth, and here's what I'm going to do. Here's the plan we have. No one's listening. And again, with the conviction and the work that we've done, I was able to say, it sounded arrogant at the time when somebody called me out and said, Oscar, how can you say that? Your stock is down 15%. Clearly the market doesn't believe you. And my answer was, and it wasn't coy, and it wasn't meant to be anything. I said, you know what? And isn't that a great buying opportunity? By November, this was in January, by November of that year before Thanksgiving, our stock had gone up $40 because we delivered 2 quarters. And that is proof, not promise. So conviction is a big thing. Trusting that your employees know what they want, know what they need, and guiding them was another difficult conviction that we had to sell people, even to my own board. It's like, okay, I'm sorry, you're gonna do what? Because we all wanna hear these tangible things, like the streets, like you're gonna cut this down. They wanted me to shut Denver. They wanted me to shut Dallas and the DC. Those are 2 of our highest growing, highest grossing markets. And one of the big decisions, horrible decisions that United/Continental made way back in the day, we sold our slots at JFK. We literally gave this market to Delta, literally handed it to them for $75 measly million. And I was on the board. I had no idea what we were doing at the time because I didn't know the business. But that, again, you learn from your mistakes. And so when it's like shut down hubs that you have, not literally over my dead body, which almost created that problem at some point.
I think we're going to have time for 1 or 2 more questions. I'm going to steal some of the time for the next section so that people want to hear, right? So we have a question over here.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you so much, Oscar. First of all, I'm also Mexican-American, so thank you for your leadership. I love United. I'm a global service, and I love that.
Well, thank you.
And these are all the seeds that you planted. So thank you for that. How did you have to change your leadership style when you were a board member as a chairman, or now that you're in a different boards? I would really appreciate that.
It's an ever-learning, ever-evolving thing. This concept that it's lonely at the top or the buck stops here sounds trite until you get there. The situation I described with that PR crisis was a perfect example. It's like there was no one else you're not gonna get any more guidance or any more training. There's no one to back you up. You're on live TV friends with 20 million people, and so there's an internal sort of fortitude that you have to be ready for. And everybody wants the corner office, and the view from there is amazing. The shit that goes with it, not so much. And again, I always say that, again, one of my sayings, I said leadership should never, and I mean never ever, be about you, but it's about the people you lead. And it's guidance that I give to folks, because when you start to this concept of how do you have to evolve your leadership, if it's to make yourself more the front person, to be the one that's recognized, to be the one that's in the headlines about the growth that all the credit is given to, if you're running the things you're doing for that, the people that work for you see that. And it's simple. It's just one of those things. You're going to hear about one of the best CEOs in the world has known for 70 years from Lord Young at Queen Elizabeth, and the things she did over that. I mean, 70 years of rule. I mean, that's just amazing. And so the evolution, and there's functional things. If you're a technical expert in finance or marketing or revenue or whatever, when you get to that level, the next level, I always told my team, my direct report, that you run organizations, but your number one team numero uno, is this room, this executive group. We are beholden to each other. We do not do anything outside of this room that we're not all agreed to. And it's hard to get that kind of power, ego, success factors get bridled in. But this is another, again, I'm a very simple person. How do you do that, Oscar? I started having these staff meetings where we started with a roundtable. Every single business leader had to spend 5 minutes talking about what they were doing today, tomorrow, next week, next month, next week. And everybody's like, well, the operations guy in particular, why do I have to sit through the HR person or the lawyer or whatever? Like, I'm running the business, right? But, you'd hear stories like the revenue guys are like, oh, we can't wait. We're going to start, flying to X city. And the operations is like, no, you're not. We don't have the aircraft, we don't have the gate, right? And so all of a sudden, the right hand and the left hand begin to understand. And very simply and easily, people begin to appreciate this concept of bringing these folks together and all gathering in one place. So your leadership has to evolve. And I had to sit back and just watch them learn, as opposed to telling them, right? What's that old Franklin thing? Tell me how to do something and I forget. Teach me, I may learn, but involve me, then good stuff happens. And that's what I ended up doing. And again, the proof of that, not the promise, when I see, and I'm walking down the hallway, back when we used to have hallways to walk around and people were working. Okay, I just sounded old there, but nevertheless. When I see the operations guy in the office with the revenue or marketing guy, which those paths never crossed. And they're sitting there debating issues and writing on walls, you've done your thing. So those are the little things. It's the thing about leadership, right? Those are the things that make me feel good, not the headlines, not those things. Because if you're looking for those things, it don't happen. The true lasting legacy is that the business, the people, Christopher Wren, who did St. Paul's Cathedral, right? If you look under St. Peter's Dome, I think, there's a small inscription. If you want my legacy, look around you. It's what he built. And it's a phrase I used when I was leaving the company. It's like, what's your legacy? It's like, look around you. You are all of those people. Not one person just retired of my leadership team has left. And the company just continues to grow. That's when you know the truth. So that evolution comes from you evolving yourself to let the right people. The concept of delegation is lost on us as leaders sometimes because there's so much pressure to deliver, and that's all.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect ending for this conversation.
Can I do one
Please. That's what I was going to ask you.
public service announcement
Please.
sort of thing? So for all of you that don't know, I suffered a severe heart attack 37 days into the job at United. And heart disease is the biggest killer in America by far. I mean, cancer's got nothing on heart disease. And mostly it's the issue that the symptoms are many and varied, and we don't know that it's happening to us. And men in particular, right? Something happens and you feel funny and you're like, okay, I'm gonna sit down or I'm gonna jump in the shower, or I'm gonna lay down. I had a massive heart attack 37 days into the job. And what was interesting about mine is that 2 weeks before, I had just raced in a 100-mile bike race and finished 10th in my age group. And I had no idea. I never knew who my father was, so I didn't have the history. But the DNA of heart disease is so embedded in you that you don't even know. But one of my training partners is a cardiologist, and he'd always talk to us about this thing. It's like he would say things like, the people that die on my operating table aren't what you think. Some of the youngest/fittest people are the ones that die because they don't deal with the issue when they feel it. And so he would admonish us to, if you ever feel anything weird, this is my message to all of you, just call 911. The worst you can be is embarrassed. And then he said something, and when you call 911, immediately tell them where you are, like duh. And then he added the dramatic part, because you may not make it past the phone call. And I remember where I was and where we were, and I remember that thought. It's like, I'm like, okay, Mark's his name. It's like, that's a little dramatic. Fast forward a couple years later, I've just started my work. I'm on this listening tour. I'm coming back to meet with the analyst. I'm interviewing a CEO. I've got all sorts of things going on that day. And I go out for a run. I come back, and I'm I was a vegan on top of this. I had just raced, and so, generally fit. I hear my phone buzzing, and as I go to it, my legs sort of get a little Gumby, I call it, a little jellyish. And it's like, that's weird. And I take 2 more steps, my legs give out, and I feel clammy. His words come rushing back. Okay, I just went for a 5-mile run. That's something I normally do. That's not a big thing. And his words came rushing back, and I crawled to this thing called a landline. Anybody know what that is? I've read about it, so and I called 911, immediately told him where I was, and 37 minutes later, I was put on life support, heart-lung machine, a medical-induced coma for 7 days, and then I had a heart transplant a few weeks later. And again, had I not known that history, so to this day, and this is not an exaggeration, there are thousands of people that have heard this story and have responded back that your story, I told my dad, my brother, my mother, my neighbor, I told myself. People stopped me in airports in tears, grown men saying, I cannot tell you how important that was for something with my dad. So I share that with you just as a lasting thing, beyond all the things we do as humans and commerce and capitalism and all those wonderful things that we're here for. Ain't nothing without you actually being around or loved ones around you. So tell that story to others. So thank you for having us.
Thank you.
That wraps up this special edition of the Outthinkers podcast. A heartfelt thank you to Oscar Munoz for his vulnerability, insight, and leadership, and to our live audience for the thoughtful questions and the vibrant energy in the room. Thank you again to this special episode sponsor, LHH, as a global leader in HR advisory and talent solutions with deep expertise in executive search, leadership development, workforce transformation, and career transition, who empowers organizations and their leaders to thrive in an ever-evolving business landscape. LHH was the perfect partner to bring this conversation forward for our listeners. Until next time.